When have you met someone who was pure evil? Let's dive in. Story 1. When I worked in a convenience store, I served an elderly lady who had a lot of shopping. She had 2 heavy bags full of food. I packed her bags for her, and a colleague of mine offered to help her take them to her car when she said she didn't have a car and was going home by bus. Then a woman who was standing nearby asked her which bus she was getting, said she was going the same way, and offered to carry her shopping to the bus stop. The elderly lady was happy with this arrangement, thanked the woman profusely, and handed her shopping over. They both left the store together. Then the woman broke into a run and took off with both bags of food, jumping onto a nearby bus, and then laughing and giving the finger to the elderly woman stranded on the pavement as the bus drove away. I have to wonder about the soul of those who willingly take advantage of vulnerable people. Story 2. I saw a man beating what was apparently his 3-year-old granddaughter with basically a tree branch. He was an elderly guy, had to have been 70 or so. This was in the middle of the city. God knows where he even got that thing. This was in Buffalo, New York. Immediately got involved, and I and some bystanders got the cops, and they carted the guy away. He was going on and on about how many times he'd been arrested before, almost bragging. The girl had such sadness in her eyes that it never left me, and when I approached the guy to make him stop, the little girl actually ran up to him and was hugging his leg. She must have been so used to abuse at that point that she didn't recognize how evil this person was. The look in her eyes was heartbreaking. I had gone to that city alone randomly to check it out and see what it had to offer, and that was the first thing I saw upon leaving my car. It broke me, and I just spent the whole night at the hotel, then just randomly walking the streets. Story 3. When I was a teenager, I used to volunteer in the preschool at church. One week I was helping with the 2-year-olds. We had a new girl come in, tiny and adorable. By the end of Sunday school class, all the other kids were terrified of her. With absolutely no expression on her face and totally silent, she had attempted to strangle a little boy, bit another hard enough to draw blood, smacked a girl across the face, poured her drink out on another, and pinched and kicked me and the other volunteer repeatedly. Not to mention dumping her snack on the floor while staring me in the eye, throwing toys in the garbage, and attempting to pull the microwave off the counter. I've dealt with difficult children before, but her totally lack of emotion was very unnerving. Story 4. My father. He was not a good person. My oldest brother, his first son, was quite literally a genius. The sort of kid that ends up in high school before he's a teenager, that graduates college before he can drive a car, and he expected that from the rest of his kids. Everything I was allowed to read was way above my age level. Technical manuals, research papers and case studies, Lord of the Rings, War and Peace, stuff like that. I managed it somehow. My sister wasn't so lucky. She struggled a lot, was yelled at because she was a 3-year-old but couldn't make it through the alphabet by herself. She couldn't add numbers. She couldn't really do anything that was asked of her, because she was fucking 3 years old. One day my father just lost it because she got stuck after the letter E. I tried to help but was reprimanded for doing so, and finally he just threw her against the wall. He started screaming the alphabet at her, kicking her over and over. He punched her, choked her as he repeated himself over and over. I was frozen in fear. I didn't know what to do. He finally stopped when my mother started coming upstairs. I still remember the look on her face as she picked my sister up and took both of us out of the room. She was never the same after that. The bruises went away eventually, but she started having seizures. She struggled with walking upright on her own, using the bathroom without assistance. Even today, almost 3 decades later, she needs full-time care and can't live a normal life. All because that piece of rubbish wanted all his kids to be geniuses instead of just one. Story 5. My ex-best friend raped his half-sister and convinced all of us he was innocent. He got 3 months weekends in prison, but the evidence was pretty much non-existent, and we all believed that his mom, who already had no contact, she was crazy, basically put her daughter up to it to get back at him for forcing himself back into her life. A few years later, his other sister committed suicide at 14 years old. We cried with him. We went to her funeral. He put the necklace he never took off over her heart as she lied in the open casket. A few weeks later it came out in her diary that he had been raping her all along too. She ended herself because she saw how furious we all were at the people who convicted him, and didn't think she would be believed either. I will never understand why that monster decided to put a token in her casket. I realized she is gone, and I don't believe there is anything past death, but I still find it very hard to deal with the fact that she will never escape him. The necklace of her attacker, and ultimately her killer, will lay over her heart forever. To answer some of the questions, he went to jail again briefly, and last I heard is living in a nearby city, dating a girl with a teenage daughter in breach of a court order. When I found this out, I tried to find information about his whereabouts so I could report him, but couldn't find any. To the people who say that I am horrible for having supported him at that time, I agree, but there was much more going on in his life and family dynamic than I want to post here. We were friends for years, and no part of me believed he was capable of what he did. Life isn't always as simple as if someone says he's guilty, he is. He was in this case, though, and there is no taking that back. Story 6. The day we got a lurcher puppy into our rescue. He had gotten the living daylights kicked out of him, and had a broken leg that had been left to heal by itself. His entire paw was bent under his leg, twisted backwards. He was covered in mange, ticks, fleas, and was so skinny, I could circle his waist with my hands. His owner demanded him back. Owner was charged with animal abuse, $1,500 fine, and a lifetime ban on owning any animals. I heard today he is appealing the decision, as he claims he didn't know the pup was so sick. Yeah, bud, the leg healed so it looks like a grasshopper's is totally normal. Pup lived and has been rehomed, but the leg had to be amputated. That person better not win his appeal. Story 7. This is a few weeks after splitting with my wife, and I received a call from her phone with my 4-year-old daughter bawling her eyes out saying, "Daddy, why don't you love us anymore?" She included my younger son. I got through that call as best I could despite the shock I was in from receiving it. A few weeks later, when I picked my daughter and son up from their mom's house, I asked my daughter why she said that, and her response was that I hadn't picked them up when I should have done, and Mummy had told them that I didn't love them anymore. Apparently, the mum had told them I was picking them up on a certain day and had got them ready, with coats and shoes on, etc., but I clearly hadn't arrived. I can't imagine the amount of stress that the children must have felt as time passed by, and I didn't arrive. Manipulating innocent children is evil. The above was 12 years ago. Since then, I won a court order for the children to live with me because of their mum's behavior. It took almost 4 years, and she was given far too many warnings by Children's Services before they advised that I take it back to court, or they would. It was too late though, I think. The kids still saw their mum, and she was still doing the same, so another 2 years and another court order, and all contact with kids, and their mum was cut. The mum decided that course of action, rather than her receiving counseling. I was gutted, as were the kids, not that they knew any of the details. 18 months later, and I can see the kids changing / really wanting to see their mum, of course. So I organized supervised contact between them all. This was okay for about 18 months when my daughter then decided to accuse me of strangulation. I was arrested, thrown in a cell for 9 hours, interviewed, charged, and then had to wait 10 months for my court appearance. Not guilty, of course, but the kids were removed from my care after the allegation and given to their mum. I don't know whether the prior damage done by their mum caused this, or if it was related to the more recent contact which I'd arranged. I don't see my daughter now, but I do see my son, and we get on really well. Story 8. When I put together the story of what happened to me many years after I was raped, I learned that my rapist had punched and kicked me, an unconscious, defenseless, and drugged 14-year girl, in the face and in the torso. He did this for absolutely no reason, just to be cruel and to feel powerful. I was unconscious and unable to fight, but he beat me very badly anyway. I wasn't awake to witness it, but I vividly remember the excruciating pain and not knowing how I got hurt back then, or why anyone would want to hurt me. I didn't know then that people could be so evil and so cruel. I do know now. Story 9. When I was in jail, I was usually stuck around men 24/7, so whenever I could put myself in a position to talk, or more, with the women I did. One of these opportunities was cleaning the psych lockdown pod. Everyone in there is locked in cells at all times, so it's both sexes, and they bring in a trustee to clean the common area. Guards didn't care if you took your time, stopped to BS with people. So anyway, there's this one woman who just has that weird, vacant look that screamed wrong. It's extremely rare, but when you see it, it gives you the chills. You just know something is really, really off there. One time I'm in there, and she's out of her cell sitting at a table, doesn't respond to hello or any other small talk. Eventually a bunch of guards show up and put her full shackles, black box, and escort her away with a team of 5 people. 1 ahead in the lead, 1 holding each arm, and 2 walking behind with tasers laser sighted on her back. All that for this short, 120-pound woman. After she leaves the pod, CO tells me she has extreme violent outbursts at random. Thanks for letting me sit with her. And they just don't like her. She's in for extreme violent abuse of her infant daughter right from birth through 18-month-old when she was busted, including letting her BF have a turn. She was ultimately convicted and sentenced to life without parole, which is very rare for female offenders. That's how extreme the case was. I'll never forget just how creepy her expression was. Story 10. Many moons ago, I was on a Navy vessel in Southeast Asia. We were given a list of places not to go on our port call. Being a young Marine, thus 10 feet tall, bulletproof, and in effect immortal, myself and a couple of friends immediately proceeded to these establishments. In one of them, while we were sitting in our booth, reveling in the fact that we could get as plastered as we want for the sum total of about $7, we couldn't believe our luck. At some point, a man sits down in our booth with us. He has a binder of photos of the women he is selling. He explains that each of them is already heavily addicted, and their purchase price comes with a 2-week supply of their drugs, but we will need to set up our own supplier when we get them back wherever they are going. He then offers to get us one more to our liking if we don't see anything we like, but he does admit that it might take some time if our tastes are too exotic. One of my friends asks where exactly one finds a red-headed Latina who already has a conveniently exploitable addiction. He then explains how. You find a girl you think might be sellable and drug her drink. You keep her asleep about 3 or 4 days, injecting her with morphine every 8 hours or so. Then when you finally let her wake up, you walk into the cell she's in, place a needle on the chair, and if she doesn't reach for it, you beat her until she can't raise her arms to defend herself anymore. Then you inject her again. Repeat until she reaches for the needle when you come into the room. After about another week or 2 of her injecting herself to avoid the beatings, you stop giving her the needles until she begs for one. Conveniently, by now she should also be mostly healed from the daily beatings. Then you sell her. That remains the only time I've ever seriously entertained killing someone. But my friends and I all came to the same conclusions at around the same time. The gorillas in suits around the bar probably belong to this guy. Even trying to lay a hand on this guy won't end well, and our bodies will probably never be found. We needed to get the hell out of there. Story 11. I want to preface this with the warning that this is obviously a huge outlier, and that's exactly why it's so horrible. But I was once at a concert, pre-COVID, where obviously people just sort of push their way to the front. This girl and her group get near the front, but there's a couple in front of them. The girl tries to push her way in front of them, but they're literally leaning on the crowd divider between the crowd and the stage, so there's really no way to squeeze in front of them. So the girl starts screaming at the guy to give her some space, or she'll make him. The guy's partner tries to calm things down and squeeze the two of them together a bit, but clearly not enough to create a whole extra space for this girl and her group. So the girl starts screaming bloody murder, calling for the security guards that are patrolling behind the crowd divider and the stage, telling them that the guy tried to stick his hands up her skirt. The couple called BS. A couple of us standing nearby called BS. But the security guards still kicked the guy and his partner out. And the speed with which the girl went from crying to giddily taking their spot, not just okay, but clearly proud of what she'd done. Evil. Story 12. My buddy took my husband and I to a business conference in which John Maxwell was guest speaking at. The whole thing was super weird. Person after person got up on stage and talked about how successful they were. Showed off pictures of their luxury cars, mansions, ranches, etc. About 4 people, and I realized that everyone seemed to be loosely related / married into the main family, and it was a complete pyramid scheme. This conference was 3 days long. Day 2, the music was loud and the air felt electric. Everyone was constantly cheering at every little thing. Talking about love, acceptance, the blessings of Jesus Christ. As if the Lord himself gave him that mansion face with rolling eyes. I can completely see how anyone could get sucked in. They did an altar call, and people ran up to the front. Let me remind you, this was a business conference. Day 3 was essentially a giant Sunday service. Began with worship music, and then John Maxwell took the stage and began talking about tithing. My husband leans over to me and says, "He looks like a big fat demon sitting up there." I kid you not. He did. That man oozed evil. I suddenly felt trapped. I realized all these poor young people were being scammed, and the audacity he has to prey on them using Christianity, robbing them of not only their money but potentially their youth. It still makes me feel sick. Screw you, John Maxwell, and anyone else in Amway-related dealings. Story 13. I wasn't exactly a witness to it, but a while back a video of a cartel killing was kinda circulating. Some people might know the one I'm talking about. I've never watched the full video, but I unfortunately saw screenshots of it by accident. It was a man, apparently a police officer, but I'm not sure, and his son. The son couldn't have been older than 15. They'd beheaded the man in front of his son, and then they cut the boy's beating heart out of his chest while he was still conscious. After seeing it, I just felt kinda off for a few days. I'm lucky to live in a pretty safe country, and I'd never seen anything like that in my life. I don't know what business they had with the man, but the poor kid didn't deserve what they did to him. He was just a child. That was just pure evil. Story 14. My mom dated a psychopath when I and my siblings were little. My baby brother was still crawling, and when he wouldn't stop crying, Denny put him on the roof of our duplex, accessible by a window, where my brother then proceeded to fall off. He was okay, somehow zero physical injury. My dog and cat didn't get out so easy. In the end, he tried to kill us all by sabotaging the furnace to fill the house with fumes. And get this, the entire time my idiot mother explaining it all away, claiming the house was haunted. I didn't realize all the awful things that happened in that house were the results of a psychopath until adulthood. Being absolutely certain that ghosts killed your animals, put your little brother on the roof, and tried to kill us all in our sleep. Does a number to a kid. I had night terrors from then well into my 20s. Anyway, this is another thanks mom story. Story 15. Back in the day, when I first moved out on my own, I rented a room with one of my best friends Dave from high school in an old beat-up house. We were pretty bad at managing our money, and often ran out days before payday, usually running out of stuff to eat. One specific day I shall never forget, I was sitting at my computer, completely starving, payday at least 2 days away, no food in the house. My room was on the opposite side of the house. I'm chatting with Dave via AIM, and I mention how hungry I was. Hey replies, I put an emergency Twinkie pack in your Star Wars tin bank. I had gotten a cheap little SW tin bank I threw change into. I basically knew he was bullshitting because there's just no way, but I picked up the bank and shook it, and I felt something in there that was basically a solid mass that I believed could in fact be a pack of Twinkies. I immediately got my hopes up with joy at the sound of a delicious Twinkie. I open it up with haste only to find 2 rolls of old Pogs glued together. In that moment of sheer disappointment, I heard a cackle behind me. I turned to find Dave in my doorway grinning at me like the Joker. He says, I knew you'd look fat ass, and then skips away. Story 16. Fairly certain a friend of mine's kid is a budding serial killer. I know for a fact that he's done some shady things to their animals, including locking one of their dogs in a shed in 115F heat, intentionally leaving a chicken coop unlocked leading to the chicken being murdered by feral cats, and the reason why he's not allowed at my house any longer. Throwing gravel at my dogs while saying, you need to be more vicious. I've told his dad all of these things, but he plays it off as accidents, the dog and chicken, or just messing around my dogs. Won't be surprised if in 15 years he does something that can't be played off. Oh, just remembered another one. Before leaving the chicken coop open, he once put the chicken in the wicker chest they keep in the backyard for pool toys. She was in there for over an hour while they searched for her, and the kids stayed quiet. They only found her because she started pecking her way through the sidewall. Story 17. My former best friend. She had been in a long-term relationship with a guy we went to school with who was a mutual friend. He was a quiet, polite, genuinely kind man, and she cheated on him for the entirety of their 6-year relationship. One time being with the boyfriend's best friend in the same bed that I was sleeping in. She lied to him constantly, and one day he completely broke. It was the most distressing thing I've ever witnessed. He broke up with her, and she was bitter about it, so told all his friends that he had raped her throughout the whole relationship, and they believed her because they didn't know her manipulative ways like I do. I tried so hard to clear this poor guy's name. I tracked down his friends on Facebook and met with them for coffee to explain. I visited his parents and spoke with them. He messaged me to say he hadn't even realized she had been saying that to people. I was basically running around doing her damage control because I felt so awful for this man. It manifested into a severe eating disorder, and my mental health completely crashed, resulting in multiple attempts. I decided to confront her. I laid everything out on the table. How disgusting and manipulative and horrible she was, and how she has destroyed her ex's life, his family and friends' lives, and now my life, and cited all my hospital stays. She apologized and cried, but I said it was too little too late, and I was walking away from the friendship. After that, my entire friendship group stopped talking to me. This woman copied exactly what I said about the impact all this has had on my mental state and reworded it to be about her. Had told all our friends that I didn't believe she was raped and shouted at her for it. My friends unfortunately believed her lies and thought I was the evil person. A few years later, this friend was attending a Susie support group for her supposed mental health issues. My friendship group finally caught her out when they walked in on her playing a recording on her phone. She had been secretly recording the people in the group, I imagine, so she'd know all the right things to say to people to make them worry about her. Only the people that walked in on her said she was laughing at the recording. Really terrifying. But at least I have my friends back. Story 18. Alan Rudolph, the Vice President of Research at Colorado State University. My family actually lived near him, and he complained constantly about our German Shepherd barking at night. I wasn't living at home at the time, but helped my dad work hard to try different things and get the barking to stop. I am saying this honestly, he didn't bark much. If he made any noise at all, Alan would call animal control immediately. Eventually we did get him to never bark at all pretty much. I can't understand why he did this except that he just hated our dog. Well, then one day he happened to be walking by, which was rare. I had never seen him outside before. He walked his dog near where our German Shepherd was outside. Our pup got excited and approached his dog, a little quickly, but whatever. He immediately shrieked, even though the dog was barely touching him. When I saw how freaked out he was, I ran over and tackled my family's dog and pinned him down. Again, this was easy because he was not acting aggressive, just overexcited. Alan knew this, he must have. He stood there and ranted about how mad he was and how he was going to get our dog removed. While standing over me, which was interesting considering he was so frightened of the dog, but was still comfortable standing over me, with the terrifying dog right there. Finally he started walking away, acting extremely dramatic. At one point, when him and his dog were a good distance away from us, I saw him get on the ground on his own holding his head, as a way to make a big display out of how upset he was. Later he spammed us with voicemails, stating that the German Shepherd violently attacked him, and that he was going to have him removed and euthanized. He also mentioned the barking, admitting that it had stopped multiple times, one after the other. We all knew he was lying, but we were still worried. This man was once a member of the Senior Executive Service, has had multiple ethical complaints and legal issues over the years, found that all out on Google. He's been accused of bribery and corruption, and even animal abuse before. Each time he gets off because his wife is an attorney, and they have money. It was bad enough that there are entire articles online questioning Colorado State's decision to hire him, when he still had an ongoing FBI investigation involving him hiring people from his previous job and all the implications that come with that. We tried to smooth things over by going to the house and apologizing. He wasn't home, but his wife was. He had apparently told her that he had been knocked down by our dog, which was a lie. He got on the ground himself. She basically said, "Whatever, you guys are screwed 'cause I am an attorney." She even said something like, "Well, maybe you shouldn't have this dog, even if the barking has gotten better." Like she literally brought the barking up out of nowhere, and even admitted it was better without us asking. Over the next few days he called my dad constantly, called the HOA and animal control constantly as well. He repeatedly said he didn't want the dog somewhere else, he wanted him dead. He also told people that our dog had a record with animal control. The only record he had was the barking complaints that Alan Rudolph himself made. We got scared and rehomed the dog to keep him safe before animal control got involved. We made sure to not tell Alan or anyone where he is. I am not even risking saying his name on here. A week or so later, the animal control agent called the house. Me and a few others who knew the situation talked to her. She said that she knew he was being overdramatic, and that there was no way our dog was getting removed as the situation didn't call for that, but it was too late as we already did it out of fear. She also said that Alan was overdramatic, and even said she had to choose her words carefully, but she knew he was a bit off. And didn't say, but almost implied, I might have misunderstood, that this wasn't the first time he had done this with someone's dog. Maybe it was good we rehomed the dog, even though I miss him. If we hadn't, I wouldn't put it past Alan Rudolph to have tried to poison him or something. I decided to use his name, because screw him. Anyways, I know this is not as bad as some other ones here, and lucky the dog wasn't killed, and has a good ending as our puppy went to a good home. One with a 4-year-old girl who plays with him, even though he is so dangerous. But that look he gave me when he was standing over me, talking about killing my dog, that was the look of pure evil. I remember it perfectly. I could feel the evil. I could see it in his eyes. It was uncomfortable to look at and think about. Story 19. This kid, 12 or 13, grabbed a hammer and brought it down on my sister's head. I was so taken aback and horrified I couldn't even scream. He was the son of one of my father's oldest friends. We'd grown up visiting, etc. He had always been a horrible person. They never had pets because he would invariably kick and stomp them to death. Anyway, on this occasion, they had come over for Thanksgiving, I think. We were in the backyard and my dad had a little shed where he kept tools. Well, I was hiding in the shed because I didn't really want to play. I saw him come into the shed and I held my breath, hoping he wouldn't see me. I hated him with a passion. Then my sister came into the shed. Well, shit. When she saw him, she turned to go. And that's when he grabbed the hammer and brought it right down on her head. It was horrifying. Her pain-filled screams filled me with terror, and I shot straight out of my hiding spot beneath the work table, and he fled. I could hear him laughing, which was confusing and repulsive, and I still hear it sometimes, that goofy, malicious chortle. My sister was on her knees, trembling, blood gushing from the wound on her head. I don't remember how we got inside the house, but suddenly we were in the bathroom, and everyone was crammed in there. My mom had my sister's head under the sink faucet, running water over the wound, an egg-shaped, bulbous thing with a crimson slit that kept oozing blood. Then they were all gone, and I was alone in my room. The house was empty of everyone. Everyone was gone. And I remember waking up and no one was home. I was still alone. I walked around the small house just to be sure. Everything was still as it had been. Plates of food everywhere. Lights blazing. I curled up on the couch and fell asleep. I don't remember anything after that, which is strange because I was 10 and should remember something of it. My sister was only 7. She recovered fully, but has a slick, 1-inch scar on her head where no hair grows. You can't see it unless you part her hair and look for it, but she has a habit of touching and rubbing the spot absently, like a sort of tic. Over the years we heard how difficult he was, and that he was a nightmare to deal with. Anyway, that crazy a-hole is currently in prison. I don't know why and never asked, just glad he is locked away where hopefully he cannot hurt anyone. Story 20. At my work we have baby chicks and other small animals for sale, and on this particular day, we had a blackout spreading out a few blocks, making it the perfect moment for what one of my coworkers did. Me and said coworker walked to where the lil chicks were, flashlights in hand, and as I'm looking in on the chicks unbeknownst to me, he throws his flashlight at one of the chicks, severely injuring it. Pretty evil, right? It gets better. After ridiculing him for several min, he leans over the baby chick he threw his flashlight at. He then proceeds to flick the chick in the head. Before the flick, the chick was shockingly up on its feet and aware, but right after that flick I just saw it stumble side to side, front to back. I felt so disgusted, like I had butterflies in my stomach, but not in a good way. To top it off, and for me being an absolute dumbass for not taking his flashlight away, he finishes the chick off by throwing his flashlight again. I could tell the chick was done. I wanted to take care of that chick, but I had no idea what to do besides tell my manager afterwards. Scumbag coworker still works there too. Story 21. One time I went to the beach with some of my friends. We were just goofing around at night, having a good time. It got late and pretty dark outside. Especially underneath the pier, it was basically pitch black. You couldn't see very far underneath the pier, but the beach was a little more well lit. My buddies and I decided to play hide and seek since it was so dark. I was wearing both a khaki shirt and khaki jeans. I thought it would be interesting to blend into the sand with my clothes. I ran a little ways away from my friends, near the stairs, to go back up to the boardwalk. I laid down flat on my back and patiently waited for the seeker to find me. I live in San Diego, and we have a lot of homeless or mentally ill people on the streets in general, as much as it hurts me to say. I've had experience seeing people urinating in front of busy roads, yelling at the top of their lungs, obviously talking to themselves and all of the like. I have no judgment for this kind of behavior, as I'm aware it's not always their choice to be in their current situation. But this interaction was completely different. As I was laying on my back, looking in the general direction of my friends, I noticed a man walking from my left to my right, coming from the boardwalk. When I first saw him, he was about 20 feet from me. He was gradually getting closer, but maintaining his proximity, never getting further as he slowed himself and watched me like a lion stalking prey. He was hunched over, taking methodical steps through the sand. He was dressed in very dark clothes, and as he noticed me, he began walking in a completely different manner. I saw him slow down, and his gaze never left me. He stared in my direction with his hand next to his pocket, as if he was waiting for the right time to use whatever he was hiding. I consider myself a very observant person. I read people well. I know when someone is radiating positive energy, when someone is having a bad day, or when someone is filled with rage. Obviously, this isn't 100% accurate at all times, but to this day, I have never felt such malicious and predatory energy from someone. This is compounded by the fact that I'm generally shorter, smaller, thinner than most guys relatively. I'm 5'7", 120 pounds, was about 20 at the time. As I'm laying here, I can tell that this man is casing me. He's seeing if I'm sleeping, if I'm alone, if he has any sort of opportunity to have his way. I made sure to let him know in subtle ways that I was in fact fully conscious by blinking, cracking my knuckles, and moving in small ways. This didn't discourage his interest, but it may have stopped his approach. There's no way to tell whether I'm correct in this or not, and I'm sure I'll catch some flack for such an anticlimactic story. But when I tell you that this is undoubtedly the closest I've ever been in my life to being kidnapped, murdered, whatever you want to call it, I'm being 100% honest. I felt evil energy. Pure evil. I'm getting up and finding my boys. I got up, dusted myself off, and took the longest route I could around this guy to keep my distance, without letting him leave my sight. Story 22. When I was 8, I was having a prolonged and very severe asthma attack. My stepdad was pissed I was laying in bed using my nebulizer when my chores were not done when he, the only adult around, came home late at night from work. I told him I couldn't breathe even enough to sit up in a chair, so that's why I used the nebulizer in bed, another thing he was mad about. He pulled me out of bed by my hair, an easy feat as I was a very small child for my age and he was a big strong man. He held onto my hair and lifted me up against some cabinets in the hall by my hair. His face was red. He was shaking in anger. He asked me again why my chores were not done, and I barely gasped out that I could not breathe. He took his huge free hand and placed it over my mouth and nose, suffocating me. While suffocating me, he got so close to my face I could feel the spit from his mouth as he yelled at me. He said, "Do you want to know what it's like not to breathe? I will show you what it's like to breathe," and squeezed harder over my mouth and nose. I could not breathe. I was panicked. He just stood there staring at me, face as red as it could be, and his eyes. They were wild. They were the eyes of a man trying to murder a child out of anger. Murder eyes. Those eyes were pure evil. I will never forget them. I felt adrenaline pumping through my body. My heartbeat was pounding. I managed to squirm out of his grasp and ran down the stairs. How did this dad I manage that I have no clue? Maybe the adrenaline? Maybe he realized he has taken things too far? My hair was still in his hand as I ran. The adrenaline allowed my lungs to open up long enough to quickly do my chores like a terrified child threatened with a whip. I finished my chores and went to bed without any medication and passed out. I woke up struggling to take every breath. I stumbled down the stairs where I met my mother, who immediately recognized my distress and drove me to a hospital. I was immediately taken back to the ICU where I was intubated, drugged, and sedated. I was there for 10 days and hardly remember a moment of it. When I finally woke up without a tube in my throat and alone, all I felt was relief that my nightmare was over. I then went home to that man, and no one knew what happened except my baby sister, who saw the entire thing happen while standing at the bottom of the stairs with a full view on my attempted murder. She never spoke of it until adulthood. I had no idea she knew until we were both adults. I wish I had known I could tell the nurse staff what happened. I wish they had noticed the very large bald spot on my scalp. I wish I knew back then I could have said something and ended it all. His torture continued for me and my sisters until he left when I was 17. One of the best days of my life. His reign of terror never stopped until that day. Story 23. I recently adopted an off-track thoroughbred. The rescue I got him from had been struggling to get him to gain weight because he'd gotten a nasty abscess that required heavy drugs that caused him to lose over 100 pounds. I was told his whole story, as much of it as the rescue knew. Shogun, formerly known as Bowler, had been raced 42 times and retired due to age. He was sent up to Canada for slaughter, but was rescued by a horse rescue in Pennsylvania. That rescue also had a mare named Katie, who was much worse off than Shogun. That's where Shogun's rescue comes in. They offered to take him and Katie. They always take horses in pairs so they aren't lonely. They were mostly rescuing Katie because she was in such horrible shape, but Shogun was a mess too. His teeth hadn't been floated, filed down, in God knows how long. His hooves were horribly cracked and jagged. He was a sack of bones. It was awful. He was also blinded in his left eye, likely due to a blow, either from an object or a kick from another horse. The rescue had his teeth floated and his hooves looked at before I adopted him. He now lives at a very nice local stable. He's almost met his weight goal of 1,200 pounds. His hooves are much better, and he's very happy. While Shogun's story is far from the worst, I just wanted to tell you all that horse racing is not an ethical sport. They train those horses real young. They train them hard. They race them hard. They push them until their hearts give out. They sustain an injury or just die. If they manage to get out of their racing career alive, they are typically sent to the slaughter, and most of them never make it out. The horses get no praise, no thanks, no credit. Instead, they get the death penalty, or, if they are lucky, they get rescued. Be mindful of the kinds of sports that involve animals you support or take part in. They are not all as innocent as they may seem. Story 24. There was an older kid in my neighborhood. His name was Cletus, I shit you not. He wasn't so much a bully as he was a psychological terror to the neighborhood kids. He was about 14 or 15. I was 11 at the time. This was the last straw before he was finally arrested and his family thrown out of their rented house. I was in my backyard when I heard a cat scream out loud, then something much more horrific. I went to the other side of my yard, where I had a decent view of one of my friend's backyards through a few trees. I saw Cletus stomping on something repeatedly, while holding a rifle for what seemed like 30 seconds. I knew not to be seen by him, so I dropped to the ground and watched as he picked something up and kicked the back door open into my friend's house. I called my mom, who called the sheriff. What ended up happening was that Cletus had decided on a whim to take my friend and his little sister hostage with an air rifle and a BB handgun. He made my friend stand about 10 feet in front of him while he took shots at his legs for practice, threatening to use his sister instead. Thankfully, he was a poor shot and only hit him 3 times out of about 15 shots he took. A group of sheriff officers surrounded the house and took him into custody when he tried to run. His parents came home, and they took him to the ER to get checked out. Thankfully, they were superficial wounds, and it was like removing splinters. The next day, they couldn't find their cat only to find it when they went to do laundry. It had been crushed from Cletus stomping on it, then ran through a cycle in the washer in the basement.